Hey, what's going on everybody? Tarafdar back with a brand new video. So today I want to talk about something very important. The most important thing when it comes to credit repair is to understand the strategies that we're using to clean up our credit reports. But there comes a time where you're deploying so many different strategies and tactics and you're kind of stuck in between a hard place and a rock, and you're wondering to yourself, what specific strategy is the best suited for individualized type of accounts? And today I think that I want to discuss with you guys, and the basis of this conversation is to really take it into that context where I describe to you individualized attack strategies. More importantly, some of the things that you can do with these individual attack strategies, the type of characteristics that you need to look out for when you're deploying your attack strategy, and also some of the tools and resources that you should look at when it comes to analyzing these individual accounts, and in retrospect understanding the differences between how to go about attacking each individual ones per their category. So with that said, let's get you started. Let's start with late payments. This is one of the most critical ways of, I think, ensuring that your credit reports moving forward have the biggest weight. And the reason I say that is because payment history is actually 35% of your credit score, which comprises single-handedly the biggest points. So if your payment history is not appropriate or is not proper, and you got a bunch of late payments and you're struggling with that, then I think our priority here is that we should focus on fixing that first. And the reason I say this is because late payments are ever so important. You have to make sure that you're taking care of them, and the way to do so is by looking at the account and ensuring that your creditors are reporting information on the payment grid appropriately. A lot of times the payment grid itself is kind of all over the place. We see that quite frequently, and the reason why we see that is because the payment grid itself, right, sometimes has a lot of fictitious issues. One of the biggest ways to analyze that is if you look at the 24 months of payment history, and you were to look at, let's assume you have the 3 credit bureaus, and if you look at each individual squares that the credit bureaus are responsible to fill up, you'll notice a significant difference there. And the reason I say that is because the credit bureaus are definitely responsible to ensure that the payment history is appropriately categorized, but also the creditor themselves are also responsible for putting that information in the reports. So most of the times what happens is the creditor is actually at fault here, and obviously we have to use the resources and strategies with that to achieve an outcome where we can actually correct those negatives. So the payment history obviously is the biggest. So the goal to do that, and the way to go ahead and attack that, is to ensure that you look at the account, historical data and context, you look at the 24-month payment grid, and you try to analyze the individual squares within those payment grid irrespective of the bureaus that are reporting them. And from that perspective, your goal is to take this and put it into a document, right, where you put together the resources and the information. You put it into a document. And in that individual document, what's going to happen is you're going to take this document now and you're going to present it. And you're going to present it to the credit reporting agencies, and you're going to explain to them that the information that's there is actually incongruent with the creditor, and they're supposed to be accurate and compliant and timely. But because the payments are mismatched across all 3 bureaus, demonstrates that the creditor is being negligent in terms of ensuring a linear information across all 3 bureaus, that they're reported at the same dates, and their activities are consistently measured and recorded. So payment history, that's how you're going to tackle it. And a lot of people will say, well, we have a lot of other ways to do that as well. You can dispute it and so on and so forth. But see, the problem with disputes, and why I'm not so strong on that, is because it's very generic. It doesn't really ask any specific request from the creditors or the bureaus when it comes to investigating. Investigation requires a certain initiation through factual issues. There's a lot of people say factual disputing and all that kind of stuff. Same damn thing, right? The goal here is identify on the actual account itself. Start with the payment grid, because that is an indication of so much mistakes that can happen from there. Once you do that, then you can go look at the dates. At that point, your dates will give you a little bit more details that you can work with and context do that. Once that's done, then what you can do is then you can fall off and say, now we know this item is not proper. The credit reporting agencies are messing up the information, or either the creditor is reporting inaccurately. Whatever the case, you guys have to fix this. And that burden has to go to the credit bureaus so that they can initiate their investigation, notify the creditor, and respective of that, try to get that resolution out for you. So that's the first thing that we got to kind of, come and realize about that. The second thing, and I think this one's going to be important as well, is the collection agencies, which is the second type of associated accounts. So we're going to break that down for you. The collection agencies, it's not very complicated to deal with, right? You really need to have an understanding of the rules and regulations around debt collectors. The biggest thing is, prior to a validation, a debt collector cannot report to the bureaus. That's the first step. A lot of people think that debt collectors can report, and at that time you can request a validation. The fact of the matter is, when they report to the bureaus and you're requesting a validation, the time frame in which they have not validated yet is a part of the FCRA, and the FDCPA requires that they cannot report that same data while challenged for validation to the credit bureaus. So that's one of the things that we need to pay attention to. See, a lot of people think, no, we can actually request the data of validation, and then once they can't verify, then they have to remove themselves from the report. The reality is, during the time that you're requesting validation, that time frame is a time frame where collection reporting to the bureaus is considered a collection activity. So when they do that, they're basically violating the FDCPA. There's no collection activity that can happen prior to validation. And hence, reporting becomes validation, or reporting becomes a collection activity, That point means that unless otherwise validated, that reporting activity cannot continue either. So that's the first point when it comes to debt collectors. Second thing you can work with debt collectors is the documentation phase. I talk quite a bit about collecting, quit claim language and documentation from the original creditor and what rights they have and so on and so forth. Now, it is possible that the debt collector comes with a bunch of statements and says, well, this is the information that we provided, and this should be sufficient for validation and enough for us to collect on this. And the reality is, you'll need a little bit more than that, right? So a good example of this is the debt that they show you. So there's telecommunication companies, and there's all sorts of people out there that have bills, and sometimes what happens is telecommunication companies, right? I'm not going to name any, are notorious for adding surcharges and bills. So when you see these type of things, and it goes into a late payment status or a collection agency, the thing is, the debt has to be certified to be accurate and timely. It has to have an accurate data and an accurate value. The problem with debt collection is you'll never know the accurate value, because sometimes surcharges are added, the price is inflated, the debt is recreated for absolutely no reason whatsoever, even though it's written up in the creditor's books. So there's a whole lot of mismanagement of accounts that are happening there, and a whole lot of inflated value that's created. So forget about the validation and the statement showing and stuff like that. Now we're going to go ahead and ask for accounting documentation. Coming up with the exact amount that they're saying that you owe, and what specifically from that alleged debt can we calculate to be an accurate and timely amount that has some numerical value that's contextual to what it is that you're doing. So that's important as well. And the reason I'm sharing this with you guys is because a lot of us, I talk about the generally accounted accepted principles and all that kind of stuff. It's an accounting term that's used generally when it comes to bookkeeping for big corporations, when it comes to tax time. That standard is when you're writing off a debt, it becomes a loss and therefore tax deductible, etc., etc. But also at the same time, debt collectors are notorious for stating that the amount is accurate, it's 100% verifiable, when in terms, accounting-wise, it necessarily doesn't have any numerical value. So that's probably something that you want to work with as well when it comes to fixing the credit with debt collectors. So those are two things that you can use with debt collectors. And maybe the third and a bonus strategy with debt collectors is don't forget about the medical things, right? A lot of people will incur medical bills, especially now during the COVID and obviously situation of that nature. And the medical facilities and the companies that you're dealing with and the offices are actually sharing that billing data with debt collectors for them to collect on behalf of the medical office or whatever the case. The referencing of actual bills owed to the medical office and stating that it was due to medical is actually a violation of the HIPAA law. Right? Now, I'm not an attorney and I'm disclosing this fully. I'm not licensed to practice law, but I'm giving you an idea that this is definitely one of those information and resources that you can leverage for your sake to take care of those negatives, right? So that's the third strategy that you can deploy with debt collectors. And then the final piece of the puzzle here, which is a third type of negative, is those charge-offs that you would see typically from an account that goes into after so many different lates into charge-off status and therefore is then sold off to a debt collector. That charge-off is an extremely tricky thing that you want to be careful with. Generally speaking, you're going to see a lot of lacking data in a charge-off account. If you were to analyze that report, you would see information like payments are not even included. You would see dates are completely off across all three. The payment grid is all messed up. So there's already so many tools and resources that you can work with. And if you formulate a strategy to go ahead and take care of them as well, you need to look at the tools of a charge-off in terms of a forensics perspective. And we talked about this in my previous videos, but you absolutely need to do that. Once you have that covered, and once you understand on how to read the charge-off accounts and what are the specific sets of data that are missing, you have more tools to work with. And in that point, in context, you can actually use this data, leverage it, and then use it to your advantage to go ahead and challenge those charge-off accounts as well. Once you do that, then you're going to start getting some outcomes and clear up your credit reports to go for whatever that you need, whether funding, underwriting, etc., etc. So those are the three type of negatives accounts that I want you to individually understand the attack strategy behind each. And why the logic behind that is because when it comes to reporting, data must be compliant, accurate, and timely. Those are the three things that we want to work with: compliant, timely, and accurate. All three things matter when it comes to reporting. And if any of the three misses, or it's not being compliant to either, it's not accurate, and of course it's not timely, then reporting cannot be initiated. To report any type of inaccurate data is a violation on its own, and it is a rightful reason to be disqualified for reporting. So that's just some of the tools I want you to be very comfortable with moving forward in our channel and our discussions, because starting now, we're going to take it up a notch when it comes to credit repair. But you guys need to understand this, okay? So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to smash that like button. Don't forget to share this video, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. And I'll see you guys on the next one. This is your guide and mentor, Tarafdar. Bye for now.